7 months earlier, Sarah Mitchell had been stacking hay bales under the endless Wyoming sky, her rifle propped against a fence post as she took aim at ground squirrels that threatened her family's struggling ranch. The Remington 700 had belonged to her grandfather, then her father, and now rested naturally in her hands as if it had been crafted specifically for her grip. Sarah Grace Mitchell, you get those chores finished before you start target shooting. Her mother's voice carried across the fields, tinged with the same resignation that had colored most of their conversations since the bank notice arrived. Mitchell Ranch, 2,800 acres of rolling hills and stubborn dreams, was bleeding money faster than a gut-shot deer. Cattle prices had plummeted. The drought had lasted 3 years longer than anyone predicted, and the bank wanted answers her family didn't have. Sarah's father, Robert Mitchell, spread papers across the worn kitchen table, his calloused hands moving between bank statements and foreclosure notices with practiced resignation. The numbers don't lie, Robert said quietly, his weathered face reflecting 47 years of Wyoming winters. We got maybe 5 months before the bank takes the ranch. I could pick up more shifts at the sawmill, but it won't be enough. Sarah's mother, Linda, reached across to squeeze her husband's hand. At 44, Linda Mitchell had the quiet strength that came from raising children in hard country and making impossible budgets stretch to cover basic necessities. We'll figure something out. We always do. The Army's offering signing bonuses, Sarah said suddenly, surprising herself with the words. The recruiter said exceptional shooters can qualify for specialized programs with enhanced benefits. Robert Mitchell looked up sharply. Sarah, you're 18 years old. You've never been further from home than Cheyenne. Ma'am, with respect, she replied. No 18-year-old girl from Wyoming has ever been deployed to Iraq either, but here we are. The Army recruiter, Staff Sergeant Thompson, had arrived at Mitchell Ranch driving a polished Chevrolet Tahoe that looked impossibly clean against the dust-covered landscape. At 35, Thompson carried himself with the practiced confidence of someone who'd spent years convincing uncertain teenagers that military service could solve their problems. Sarah, your shooting scores from the county competitions caught our attention. We've got programs specifically designed for marksmen with your capabilities. Enhanced signing bonuses, accelerated training tracks, and guaranteed placement in specialized units. The signing bonus alone would cover 6 months of mortgage payments, Sarah thought, watching her parents exchange glances across the kitchen table. Her father's weathered hands remained steady as he poured coffee for their unexpected guest, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Tell me about the specialized programs, Sarah said, meeting Thompson's gaze directly. I know that exceptional marksmen can qualify for advanced training that leads to elite assignments. And I know that specialized programs come with specialized compensation. They also come with specialized risks, Thompson said seriously. Sniper training isn't summer camp. It's designed to break people who think they're tough enough to handle anything. The dropout rate exceeds 70%. Sarah met his gaze without flinching. Sergeant, I've been supporting my family's ranch since I was 12 years old. I put meat on our table through hunting since I was 14. I've won every shooting competition within 200 miles of here for the past 4 years. I don't break easily. Thompson studied her for a long moment, taking in her steady hands, direct eye contact, and quiet confidence that radiated from her small frame. At 5'7" and 135 pounds, Sarah Mitchell didn't look like the typical military recruit, but something in her bearings suggested depths that weren't immediately visible. Tell you what, Thompson said finally, there's a qualifying shoot happening at Fort Carson next week. Prospective sniper candidates from across the region will be testing. If you can place in the top 10%, I'll guarantee your acceptance into the advanced marksmanship program. The drive to Colorado took 4 hours through mountain passes that reminded Sarah of home, though these peaks were more jagged than Wyoming's rolling hills. Fort Carson sprawled across the high desert like a small city, all concrete buildings and precise geometry that spoke of military efficiency. Sarah had never seen so many people in uniform moving with such coordinated purpose. The qualifying range stretched across a valley between two ridgelines, with targets positioned at distances that made Sarah's stomach flutter slightly. The longest shots she'd attempted back home rarely exceeded 400 yards. Here, the furthest targets stood at 800 yards, shimmering in the heat distortion like mirages. 43 candidates had arrived for the assessment, mostly men in their 20s and 30s with military experience etched into their postures. Sarah found herself the youngest by several years and one of only 3 women present. Around her, conversations centered on previous deployments, specialized training courses, and equipment preferences that sounded like foreign languages. Mitchell stepped up to the firing line, barked Drill Sergeant Patricia Vega, a compact woman whose intensity made up for what she lacked in height. Let's see if Wyoming farm girls can hang with real soldiers. Sarah approached the firing line carrying the standard M16 rifle, a weapon significantly different from her familiar Remington, but operating on the same fundamental principles. Around her, fellow candidates struggled with basic marksmanship concepts, fighting their weapons instead of working with them. The target stood at 400 yards, distance Sarah considered practically point-blank range. She settled into a stable shooting position, adjusted for the slight crosswind, and began engaging targets with mechanical precision. "Cease fire," Sergeant Vega called after Sarah had emptied her magazine. "Private Mitchell," Colonel Hayes began without preamble, "what do you know about your grandfather's military service?" Sarah's pulse quickened. "Not much, sir. I know he served in World War II. Recently I found some documents suggesting he might have been a sniper." Hayes nodded slowly. Richard Mitchell wasn't just a sniper. He was part of a highly classified program that identified and developed individuals with unusual aptitudes for precision shooting. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a black and white photograph of a group of soldiers standing before target range. In the center stood a younger version of her grandfather, holding a rifle that looked remarkably similar to the Remington 700 now in Sarah's possession. The Apollo program began in 1943, Hayes continued. Military scientists had identified a rare genetic variation that affected visual processing, proprioception, and temporal cognition. In layman's terms, people with this genetic marker processed visual information differently, faster, more accurately, with an intuitive understanding of ballistic physics that couldn't be taught. Sarah stared at the photograph, pieces falling into place. And my grandfather had this marker. He was one of the first identified. The program was named after Apollo, the Greek god of archery, known for never missing his target. Hayes gestured to the folder. Turn to the next page. Sarah found a document detailing shooting results from 1944. Her grandfather's name topped the list with a confirmed shot at 900 yards. But someone had handwritten a note in the margin. Actual 1,700-yard security classification Umbra. Sarah looked up shocked. In 1944, with World War II-era equipment. Hayes nodded. It was considered impossible by conventional standards. Your performance yesterday suggests the genetic trait passed to you. We ran preliminary tests on your shooting data. The consistency, the intuitive corrections for environmental factors, the speed of target acquisition, all indicate you possess the same capabilities that made your grandfather legendary. The specialized sniper program at Fort Carson operated under different rules than standard military training. Sarah found herself among 12 candidates selected from hundreds of applicants, each possessing exceptional marksmanship credentials and psychological profiles indicating the mental resilience required for precision elimination work. The training facility occupied a restricted section of the base, surrounded by additional security, fencing, and warning signs that made clear this area was off-limits to casual observation. Chief Instructor Master Sergeant Rodriguez had spent 15 years as a Special Forces sniper before transitioning to training roles. His weathered face and deliberate movements spoke of someone who understood that patience and precision were matters of life and death. "Mitchell," Rodriguez called during their first morning briefing, "you've demonstrated exceptional natural ability, but natural ability without discipline gets people killed. This program will strip away everything you think you know about shooting and rebuild it from the foundation up." The first week focused on fundamental skills that seemed almost insultingly basic after Sarah's impressive qualifying performance. Breathing techniques, trigger control, body positioning, equipment maintenance. Every movement was analyzed and corrected with microscopic attention to detail. Rodriguez watched her progress with the calculating gaze of someone evaluating whether she possessed the temperament for work that required absolute emotional control under extreme pressure. The psychological component proved more challenging than the technical aspects. Combat scenarios designed to test decision-making under stress. Simulated missions where split-second choices determined success or failure. Role-playing exercises that forced candidates to confront the reality that their future work would involve taking human lives to protect others. Some candidates struggled with the moral implications. Others couldn't handle the pressure of knowing that mistakes in their chosen profession meant death for themselves or their teammates. Sarah approached each challenge with the same methodical determination that had carried her through years of supporting her family's ranch during financial crisis. Advanced training pushed Sarah beyond anything she'd experienced on Wyoming ranches. The technical curriculum covered ballistics, weather pattern recognition, equipment maintenance, and complex mathematical calculations that transformed shooting from instinct into precise science. But it was during extended field exercises that Sarah truly distinguished herself from the remaining 8 candidates. The mountain training facility near Colorado Springs replicated combat conditions with ruthless accuracy. Candidates spent days in concealed positions, maintaining perfect stillness while observing target areas through high-powered scopes. Every muscle ache, every moment of boredom, every temptation to shift position became a test of mental discipline. Rodriguez appeared beside Sarah's position after she'd maintained surveillance for 18 hours without detectable movement. Outstanding concealment. Mitchell, your grandfather would be proud, but can you maintain this level of focus when lives depend on it? The culminating exercise simulated a high-value target elimination mission. Sarah and her spotter, Corporal Williams, established position on a ridge overlooking a valley where instructors had positioned targets representing enemy commanders. The shot distance measured nearly 1,000 yards, requiring calculations that accounted for elevation, wind speed, temperature, humidity, and even the rotation of the Earth. Williams fed her environmental data through whispered communications, while Sarah adjusted her scope settings with mechanical precision. The specialized .300 Winchester Magnum they'd been assigned for this mission felt different from her familiar Remington, heavier and more powerful, but operating on the same fundamental principles her grandfather had taught her. Breath control became meditation. Trigger squeeze transformed into an extension of her heartbeat. The crosshairs settled on the target with absolute stability as Sarah entered the zone of perfect focus that separated exceptional marksmen from merely good ones. The shot broke clean and true, the bullet's trajectory carrying across the valley with lethal precision that validated months of intensive training and confirmed her readiness for operational deployment. Training completion brought both pride and apprehension as Sarah received orders for her first operational deployment. Of the 12 candidates who'd begun the specialized program, only 4 had successfully completed all requirements. The graduation ceremony was deliberately low-key, reflecting the classified nature of their future assignments. Colonel Hayes presented each graduate with a distinctive marksmanship badge and a sealed envelope containing deployment orders. Sarah opened hers to find assignment to Special Operations Task Force Bravo operating in Iraq's Western Desert region. Deployment preparations consumed the following weeks with medical evaluations, equipment fitting, and final briefings that transformed abstract training scenarios into concrete operational realities. The specialized .338 Lapua Magnum assigned for her mission represented the pinnacle of sniper rifle technology, capable of precision engagement at distances exceeding 1,500 yards. Sarah spent hours familiarizing herself with every component, adjusting the scope, testing ammunition loads, and ensuring perfect mechanical integration between weapon and operator. Her spotter assignment paired her with Sergeant Martinez, a veteran of 3 combat deployments who'd specifically requested assignment with a new Apollo program graduate. Martinez possessed the calm professionalism that came from extensive experience in hostile environments, combined with genuine curiosity about working with someone whose capabilities had generated considerable discussion among special operations leadership. The flight to Iraq departed from a military airfield in Colorado during pre-dawn darkness, the transport aircraft carrying a mix of regular troops and specialized operators heading to various assignments across the theater. Sarah used the long flight hours to review mission briefings, study terrain maps, and mentally prepare for the transition from controlled training environments to combat operations where mistakes carried lethal consequences. As the aircraft began its descent toward the forward operating base, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her from hunting ground squirrels on Wyoming ranches to preparing for precision elimination missions in desert warfare. Forward Operating Base Crimson squatted in Iraq's western desert like a fortified island surrounded by endless expanses of sand and rock. Sarah's arrival coincided with intelligence reports indicating increased insurgent activity in the region, making her specialized capabilities immediately relevant to ongoing operations. The base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Thompson, briefed Sarah and Martinez within hours of their arrival. Intelligence assets had identified a high-value target designated Scorpion, believed to be coordinating attacks against coalition forces from a compound in the mountains 40 kilometers northeast of their position. Scorpion's elimination had become a priority after recent operations resulted in significant coalition casualties. The target compound occupied a strategic position on a mountainside, offering commanding views of approach routes while remaining difficult to assault directly. Conventional military operations would require significant resources and likely result in heavy casualties, making precision sniper engagement the preferred solution. Sarah studied satellite imagery and reconnaissance photos that revealed the operational challenges ahead. The compound's elevation and defensive positioning meant that effective engagement would require shots at distances approaching the absolute limits of current sniper rifle technology. Environmental factors including altitude, temperature variations, and unpredictable desert winds would complicate ballistic calculations beyond anything she'd encountered during training. Martinez reviewed logistics and insertion plans while Sarah analyzed potential shooting positions on nearby ridgelines. The mission would require infiltration to within 1,800 yards of the target, establishment of concealed observation posts, and patient surveillance until Scorpion presented a clear engagement opportunity. Success demanded perfect coordination between spotter and shooter, flawless environmental calculations, and the mental discipline to maintain absolute focus during extended periods of waiting. As Sarah prepared her equipment for the mission, she remembered her grandfather's words about patience being a sniper's most important weapon. Tomorrow would test everything she'd learned during months of intensive training. The insertion helicopter lifted off from Forward Operating Base Crimson at 0200 hours, flying low across the desert terrain to avoid detection by insurgent observation posts. Sarah felt the familiar weight of the 338 Lapua Magnum secured across her back, its presence a constant reminder of the mission ahead. Martinez monitored communications while conducting final equipment checks in the cramped aircraft interior. 15 minutes to drop point. The pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. Weather conditions holding stable. Winds at 12 knots from the southeast. Martinez leaned forward. Equipment check one last time. Sarah patted each component of her gear. Rifle secured in its case. Rangefinder, ammunition, communication equipment, survival essentials. The specialized rifle they'd received for this mission weighed heavily across her back, its presence a constant reminder of what lay ahead. As the helicopter banked toward their landing zone, Sarah's mind drifted back to the Wyoming mountains, to her family's ranch, to the first time her grandfather had placed a rifle in her small hands. She'd been 9 years old, standing in the field behind their house, uncertain and eager. "Take your time, Sarah," Richard Mitchell had said, his voice gentle but firm. "A rush shot is a missed shot. Feel the weapon become part of you. Understand what it wants to do." She learned that lesson hunting ground squirrels that threatened their livestock, practicing until shooting became as natural as breathing. Now, years later, and thousands of miles from home, those same principles would guide her through the most challenging shot of her career. The helicopter touched down silently in a predetermined landing zone, and Sarah and Martinez quickly moved into the surrounding rocks, beginning their approach to the observation position that would determine the mission's success. The target compound materialized through Sarah's scope as dawn light gradually illuminated the mountainside 1,800 yards away. At this extreme distance, the curvature of the planet would come into play. Subtle variations in air density between the ridge line and the valley would alter the bullet's path in ways that no existing ballistic calculator could fully predict. "Martinez, I need higher ground," Sarah said suddenly, studying the terrain. "There's a formation about 60 yards up that would give me better angle and elevation. Less interference from thermal currents in the valley." Martinez frowned. "That position would be more exposed." "I know, but at this distance, the improved shooting conditions outweigh the increased vulnerability." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "This isn't a standard shot, Sergeant. We need every advantage we can get." After a moment's consideration, Martinez nodded. "We'll maintain position here and establish communication relay. Mitchell and I will move to the higher position." The formation Sarah had identified was a jutting rock outcrop that provided a commanding view of the valley below. It also offered natural concealment, while allowing for the precise shooting angle required at this unprecedented range. Hours passed as they maintained surveillance of the compound below. Through her scope, Sarah observed the daily rhythms of insurgent activity, cataloging patrol patterns and identifying potential engagement opportunities. The desert heat created shimmering mirages that complicated target identification, while shifting winds required constant recalculation of ballistic data. At 1,347 hours, Martinez whispered urgently, "Target confirmed. Scorpion emerging from main building." Sarah adjusted her scope and immediately acquired the figure moving across the compound courtyard. The rangefinder confirmed 1,812 yards, a distance that pushed beyond documented sniper engagement records. Environmental conditions had stabilized with minimal wind drift. Sarah controlled her breathing, feeling her heartbeat slow as she entered the focused state that separated exceptional marksmen from the merely competent. The crosshairs settled with absolute precision as she prepared to make military history. The trigger broke cleanly under Sarah's finger, the .338 Lapua Magnum recoiling against her shoulder with controlled violence. For the next 3 seconds, physics took control as the specially selected match-grade ammunition traveled across 1,812 yards of a rocky desert, compensating for wind drift, elevation drop, and the subtle effects of atmospheric pressure that separated impossible shots from merely difficult ones. Through her scope, Sarah maintained visual contact with the target area, watching for confirmation of impact, while Martinez began timing the bullet's flight path. At this extreme range, the projectile would require nearly 3 full seconds to reach its destination, an eternity in combat operations where split-second timing often determines success or failure. Impact, Martinez confirmed quietly. "Target down. No movement detected." Sarah continued observing through her scope as the compound erupted into confused activity. Insurgent fighters emerged from buildings, searching frantically for the source of the shot, while their leader lay motionless in the courtyard where he'd fallen. The extreme range had made their position effectively invisible to enemy observation, providing the tactical advantage that made such operations feasible. Confirmed elimination, Sarah reported through her radio to forward operating base Crimson. "Scorpion is neutralized. Beginning extraction procedures immediately." The shot had established a new record for confirmed sniper elimination, though the classified nature of the operation meant that official recognition would remain restricted to military personnel with appropriate security clearances. Martinez began packing equipment, while Sarah carefully secured her rifle, both operators moving with the practiced efficiency that came from extensive training in hostile environment operations. The extraction helicopter would arrive at their predetermined landing zone within 40 minutes, providing sufficient time to reach the pickup point while maintaining operational security. As they began their movement away from the shooting position, Sarah reflected on the moment that had just transformed her from a promising trainee into a legendary military marksman whose capabilities would influence special operations doctrine for generations to come. 7 months later, Sarah Mitchell returned to Wyoming on leave, carrying experiences that had transformed her from a ranch girl with exceptional shooting skills into one of the most accomplished military marksmen in American history. Her record-breaking shot had been confirmed and documented in classified files, establishing new standards for long-range precision engagement that would influence special operations planning for decades to come. Standing on the familiar hills of her family's ranch, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her from hunting ground squirrels to eliminating high-value targets in Iraq. The skills remained fundamentally the same, but their application had evolved far beyond anything she'd imagined. "You've changed," her father observed quietly, joining her on the porch where she stood watching the Wyoming sunset paint the sky in brilliant orange and gold. "The uniform suits you, but there's something different in your eyes now, something that wasn't there before." Sarah nodded, understanding what he meant. The weight of responsibility that came with her specialized capabilities had altered her perspective in ways that civilian life couldn't fully accommodate. Colonel Hayes had visited the ranch earlier that week, presenting Sarah with a commendation that acknowledged her exceptional service while maintaining the operational security that surrounded her achievements. He'd also delivered a package containing her grandfather's World War II service medals and a letter written decades earlier but never delivered. The letter revealed Richard Mitchell's own struggles with the burden of exceptional marksmanship capabilities and his hope that future generations would find better ways to balance duty with personal peace. "Skill without purpose is just showing off," Sarah finished, remembering her grandfather's words. "But skill applied to something important can change the world." As the old colonel departed, Sarah stood holding the medal in her hand, feeling its weight and connection to a legacy she was only beginning to understand. Her story would continue across multiple deployments and increasingly complex missions, but her foundation remained rooted in Wyoming values, hard work, family loyalty, and the understanding that skills without purpose were merely showing off.